Thank you for watching KNBSTV. My name is Tony Lewis, and I have a special guest today. His name is Sheldon Eskin. Hello.
Hi,
Sheldon.
Tony. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Oh, really good.
We're here to talk about his new radio show that he's going to be having on one of our news stations. Go ahead, tell us about it, Sheldon.
Oh, it's an interview show, and it's this is hard to say because I'm saying it myself. It's a great show. It's on Kpro, Kpro, AM 1570, and it's also, of course, on their internet station. It's on my internet station, SheldonEskinShow.com, and it interviews arts, entertainment, and there are a few other little asides that really go with it. But I had one with a great art author. It's easy for you to say, with a great author. In fact, a couple of authors.
What area does this station cover?
It actually goes from, I think it's almost up to Barstow, all the way down past Palm Springs, Rancho Mirage, going down to, I think, Indio. It also goes out to Rancho Cucamonga, all of San Bernardino, and Riverside. And it's a really nice station. I'm on at 5 o'clock in the morning every Wednesday, 5 to 5:30. But depending on where you're located, if you're listening to the internet, that 5 o'clock might be 8 o'clock.
It'll be worldwide, right?
Yeah, that's right.
The station advertises as a Riverside station. In my Lake Arrowhead home, I got a curiosity, I tuned in, I was able to pick it up in Lake Arrowhead.
It's
100 miles away, right?
Well, it's a great station. Well, it actually has, if I'm not mistaken, it's 5,000 watts, which is the same as some of your real popular stations right here in Los Angeles. And it's a direct signal that just goes out and very clean.
Now, you've also been doing a show on one of our FM stations in LA. Tell us about that.
Oh, I've been doing a show called The Voice of the Blues. And I've been doing The Voice of the Blues for, I think I started that one here in 1990. And, well, Tony, you haven't been able to get rid of me since.
27 years straight. You're like clockwork. You show up, you do your show, and now you have your following. You're looking to expand this show now to Riverside. And tell us, you're going to have a lot of guests, I hear, in this new show? I
have had some of the greatest. I feel so lucky. In fact, the other day, I interviewed a gentleman named Ron Hull. Ron Hull wrote a book. The book was the same kind of difference as me. It was on the New York Times Bestseller list, and is coming out as a movie from Paramount in October. And the cast is Renee, Zellweger, John Voight, etc. And it is a complete, all of the major players in it are truly major players. They're all Academy Award winners, and it's a great book. The interview, Ron was such a great person to interview, and I also interviewed another gent by the name of John Mulholland. Now, John Mulholland has been doing documentaries for, a long time, but he just did a documentary on Gary Cooper and Hemingway. And actually, they were best friends. And that is was that a great interview?
Welcome to the Sheldon Eskin Show with our guest, John Mulholland, the writer and director for Cooper and Hemingway, The True Gem. Hi, I'm Sheldon Eskin, and I'm here with John Mulholland, the writer and director for The True Gem, about Cooper and Hemingway, opposites in many ways, but best friends for a long time.
When did you get started doing documentaries?
Around 1980. There was something called the Arts Network. It was one of the first two cable stations, along with CBS Cable. And I got in at the ground floor. It was really great because no one knew what they were doing or anything. And you'd do a documentary that could be 37 minutes, and it would start at 8 o'clock and run to 8:37, and the next one would start at 8:38 and go through. And it was a wonderful time to be doing it because there were no rules.
I know you did several projects. One of them was Liza Minnelli Reflecting and Angela Lansbury. Can you talk about some of your other work and some of the fun you had doing some of the things you've done?
Yeah, the Angela Lansbury came through. I had met her on something else, and I was good friends with Ingrid Bergman's daughter, Pia Lindstrom, and Gaslight was coming out in DVD, and they wanted to do a little documentary on it, so Pia asked me if I would do it. It really wasn't something I had ever thought of, but Angela Lansbury, happened to be available, and I talked to her and said, how'd you like to be a part of this? And she said, yes, I'd love to. She had some wonderful stories about Gaslight, especially just starting out and how nervous she was on the set, but how nice Charles Boyer and Joseph Cotton and everyone were to it, Ingrid Bergman. The Liza Minnelli thing started, I was good friends with Humphrey Bogart's son, Stephen Bogart, and he had grown up across the street from Judy Garland and had become very good friends with Liza Minnelli, and she was having a very bad time. And MGM was putting together a DVD of Meet Me in St. Louis, and they brought me in and said, I'd like to do this. It'll be a quickie. And so we just rented a room at the Plaza, and Liza came in, and it was extraordinary because she talked literally for an hour with a camera on her. It was just the opposite of what you might expect given the public persona of Liza Minnelli. She was just terrific and articulate and going over her mother and father and what it was like growing up like that and what she's had to face and deal with, all the various manifestations of either one. It was really wonderful because I didn't know what to expect other than the public Liza Minnelli, and she was not that at all. She was just terrific.
Right here at the Sheldon Eskin Show. With me, Sheldon Eskin. We're with John Mulholland, the director, writer of The True Jen, and a documentary filmmaker, and a whole lot more. Let's get back to John Mulholland.
And moving into today, where we have The True Jen, how did you get interested in doing Cooper and Hemingway?
As a kid, I had always liked Gary Cooper. My father gave me Old Man in the Sea as a birthday present at some point. I was 12 years old, I think. And I just immediately was taken with Hemingway, and over the next 20 years read everything he had written, and Cooper the same way. And I used to think, long before I knew anything about them, that they were very similar in their approach. And I know that especially with acting now, Cooper's less is more style and extremely understated is not in. He didn't showcase himself. But I've always found that a very ingratiating way to be. I talked to Al Pacino once about it. Cooper's one of his favorite actors, and he said it was just an elegance to his understatement, that he never seemed just to be acting. He just seemed to be. If he'd walked into the room and sat down, and there he was. And I've always felt that about Cooper, and I still feel it about Hemingway. He's terribly misrepresented in the academia and critical circles. And in the early 80s, after I had done some things for arts, the program director said, look, at things are working out well, what would you like to do? And I said, how about something on Cooper and Hemingway? And we talked about it. And he said, that sounds good. Let's see what we can find out. And at that time, for whatever reason, a bunch of old Hollywood, so-called classic Hollywood women especially, had relocated to New York. Fay Ray, I don't know if you're familiar with the original.
Oh, yeah.
King Kong. She had moved to New York. Lillian Gish from Birth of a Nation. God, there were others too. And I got, in fact, when I got with Fay Ray, her apartment over the East Side, she had an entire closet dedicated to Gary Cooper. They had made 5 movies together, and she had all this memorabilia. It was astonishing, and she just loved him, just talked about how great he was. And in fact, when her career started to falter, as talkies came in, and how good he was to her, helping her out, getting her the role in a movie called One Sunday Afternoon, later remade as Strawberry Blonde.
I think a lot of women like Gary Cooper.
Yes, yeah. Although she did say to me, it was weird. She said, you know that we were never an item. And she said, I'm one of the rare actresses that can say that. And she said, I'm not saying it proud or anything. just that we had 5 movies together and we never were an item. She pointed that out to me.
You know, when I was reading some of your literature as I was going through, and I saw there were a few things that really kind of popped out to me. And one was, why do you think in many ways the match between Hemingway and Cooper was the perfect match?
I think that they complemented each other. Cooper's strength as a human being was this Zen-like approach to life, that it was short and that there wasn't all that much to be erupt and get angry about, that play it as it lays. And he was able to give that to Hemingway. Hemingway say, "What are you doing?" Some jerk in a bar starts jawing at you. And Cooper would say, "I turn my back." And Hemingway would just stare at him and say, "How do you do that?" So you just do it. And Hemingway had something that Cooper stumbled into acting. He was a stunt. He was actually had been accepted at the Chicago Art Institute. And he was in L.A. to see his parents and bumped into a couple of friends, cowboys that he knew from Montana. And they said, "Hey, there's really easy money to be picked up in pictures. And you can just go and be a stuntman. You get $5 a day for falling off horses and stagecoaches and getting clapped in a bar." And so Cooper did it for a year, and an awful lot of broken bones in that, and decided he'd like to try to be. He saw Tom Mix and all these others making all this money riding horses, which he could do. And he had a screen test made, and he stumbled into acting. Whereas Hemingway writing was something that was inside him from the earliest waking hours. It was something he was going to do. And Cooper didn't have that, and he locked on to Hemingway's need and ability to be driven from the inside like that. Cooper was not driven from the inside to be an actor. And in fact, many people had said how Cooper was a one-handed actor. He had so many interests outside of acting that at 6 o'clock, he'd wipe the makeup off, get in his car, and had so many other things he enjoyed doing that he wouldn't think about what he was doing until the next day, back on the set. But he admired Hemingway's inner drive, and he never had that. And they complemented each other. They were no threat to each other since they were in different artistic fields.
Now let's get back to John Mulholland talking about Cooper and Hemingway with some more fascinating stories.
I know a little bit about Gary Cooper and Gary Cooper's father. I think he was the Montana Supreme Court justice.
Yes.
And he also had a ranch. And therefore, I think Cooper was basically from an affluent family, but then had to leave with his mother to go to England.
Cooper's mother took him and his older brother Arthur to England because she thought they were becoming too, I think the word was rustic, and wanted them to. And in fact, the only reason they came back to America was because World War I was on the horizon in 1913. And it's the only reason she came back. She'd have stayed on in England. The novelist Jim Harrison told me that was not uncommon, that English families, especially the mother, would return to England and leave his wife's family was like that in Montana. Her mother left and went back to England. And so when Cooper came back, he had a British accent, and he used to get into fights because kids would bully him for having the British accent.
When I was doing some research, I was looking actually at some of the similarities I saw. Both of them were extremely successful in their profession, and both of them were award-winning. Cooper with his Academy Award, the Nobel Prize to Hemingway, and also both of them were on a commemorative postage stamp. And I was just wondering, when you were doing your research, what did you find about the similarities between that? I know that politically maybe they had some differences. They both liked to hunt. But what did you find as their similarities that helped them attract?
Well, they both were shy, and most people that hear this are surprised to hear that Hemingway was shy. But he was very, very shy, Hemingway. And the two of them seemed to appreciate that in the other. From when they first met, they realized that they were much more at ease in small groups where they didn't have to promote themselves. Hemingway had an awful lot of problems with that because he was a big drinker. And when he drank, he would then be loud, boisterous, aggressive, sometimes angry, unpleasant, crude, insulting. But their shyness was something that drew them together. They also both had great senses of humor. They enjoyed each other's sly British. They both had British sense of humor, dry, sly, and Hemingway was very impressed. Hemingway had tremendous guilt if he focused on another woman while he was married or while he was with another. Didn't mean he necessarily stopped it, but he had tremendous guilt about it, and he never could reconcile having affairs. And he was just apparently in awe of Cooper's ability to have an affair and then go back to his wife. A. Hotchner, the writer, who was very good friends with both Hemingway and Cooper, pointed out how Cooper had a real solid home life. His wife, Rocky, daughter, he had a home base that even when he'd go out and have his affairs and his adventures, he'd return to that, and it was bedrock. Whereas Hemingway never had anything like that. His whole home life was chaotic. He often was moving around, and he'd come from Havana back to Key West, lived there a while. He didn't have, and Hemingway locked onto that with Cooper. In fact, Hemingway sent his three sons at different times to stay with the Coopers out in L.A. to give them some stability. Each one of them spent time with the Coopers in California to get them away from the rather chaotic nature of the Hemingway home front.
We've been listening to part one of John Mulholland and his great documentary about Cooper and Hemingway, The True Gen. Go to their website, www.cooperhemingway.com, and you can pick up a copy. You know what? It's being released on Blu-ray. It's a great documentary. It's a great film, entertaining and informative. Me, I'm Sheldon Eskin, right here at The Sheldon Eskin Show. Till next time. Welcome to The Sheldon Eskin Show with me, Sheldon Eskin, and our guest, John Mulholland, the writer and director of Cooper and Hemingway, True Gen. And this is part 2 of our interview with John Mulholland. We're back with John Mulholland, the writer and director of Cooper and Hemingway, The True Gen, narrated by Sam Watterson. And well, let's get right into John, because I want to find out a lot more about the True Gen and more about the relationship between Cooper and Hemingway.
How did Cooper and Hemingway meet?
They had been trying to meet. Hemingway had called Cooper in 1938 and said, how'd you like to come to Sun Valley and meet? And then for whatever reason, Cooper couldn't make it. And then in 39, they talked again and couldn't. And in 40, they finally met in Sun Valley. The interesting thing is that Patrick Hemingway told me that his father had Gary Cooper in his mind when he was creating the character of Robert Jordan in For Whom the Bell Tolls. And I don't know if this is why he was trying to meet him in 38 and 39, but it almost seems to me as if it probably was. But then in 1940, they finally did meet, but For Whom the Bell Tolls was already finished. I talked to a fellow out there when I was first researching this before I ever got involved in doing it, who said how when they first met, when they were introduced, it was like there was a line drawn on the sand, and they were like two Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer, and then they got it done and just became instant friends.
When you interviewed Kirk Douglas for The True Gem, what was his relationship, that Kirk Douglas's relationship between Gary Cooper, and did Kirk Douglas also know Ernest Hemingway?
No, he didn't, but he had known, he had told us how Cooper was very, very good to him. When he first got out to Hollywood at parties, Cooper would come up to him and introduce him to people and that. And Kirk Douglas also, when Cooper and Patricia Neal were in and out of their relationship for like a year and a half, he'd break off with Patricia Neal, and Kirk Douglas was very interested in Patricia Neal. And he would meet with Patricia Neal, but as he said to us, he said, I knew she'd never really want me because she only liked tall men, and I didn't qualify. But his admiration for Cooper was, when he was talking to us, he just said the man had, he'd walk into the room and he'd command attention by doing nothing, by simply appearing. So there was such a grace to him.
A great presence.
Yeah, and that he's the one that told us about the letter. We did not know about it, and offered to read it on camera, which he did. And it's a little bit longer than what we edited it down some, but it's going to, the whole thing will be on the Blu-ray. It's a wonderful letter, and the fellow, Edward Abbey, who wrote the novel The Last Hero, the movie that Kirk Douglas is talking about, Lonely Are the Brave, he did write for Cooper. He meant it for Cooper, but Cooper was too ill. But it's hard to imagine anybody else but Kirk. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not, but it's hard to imagine anybody but Kirk Douglas in it. He told us it's his favorite role.
When you were doing this, did Hemingway's family or Cooper's family, it appears that they were definitely behind you in doing this and put their blessing on it.
Yeah. Yes, they were terrific.
We're here with John Mulholland, the documentary filmmaker and the writer and director for Cooper and Hemingway, The True Gem. Me, I'm Sheldon Eskin, and you're right here at the Sheldon Eskin Show. And now, I'm a big fan of the Westerns. I liked Hemingway. I love Cooper's work. And so, let's get back to John, who has some great stories.
Gary Cooper, of course, was conservative, and Hemingway was more to the other side, the liberal. But around the time of the House on the Un-Americans Committee, Cooper was actually, I don't think he was subpoenaed, but he was asked to come in as a friendly witness. And he actually spoke, but he didn't name names. And he also hired artists that were on the blacklist. And I think this kind of what you're saying tells me that Cooper was really kind of a really stand-up guy and a good friend to those that he liked.
Yeah, they both, the more I look, we did have a section on it originally, but it was too complex graphically to get across, because what they both were really are, and in today's term, libertarians. And I don't mean the alt-right Aryan Nation, these annoying, these despicable right-wingers of today. They like Hemingway stayed away from Ketchum and Sun Valley for 10 years because Sun Valley outlawed gambling in 1948. Used to have gambling was legal in Ketchum. And when they did that, he just said the state, the government has no right to legislate morality. And he stayed away for 10 years because of that. And they both, Cooper was in libertarian that way too. I mean, he voted for Roosevelt in 32 and 36, and in 40, he voted for Wendell Willkie because Wendell Willkie was more open about admitting that, yes, war is coming and we better get ready. And Cooper had visited Germany in late 1938 with his father-in-law, who was a liberal and sent there by Franklin Roosevelt. And he had seen what Germany was and knew and understood. And he was angry at Roosevelt for not having, for still playing the isolationist game. I got to be friends with Jonathan Foreman, Carl Foreman's son, who wrote the screenplay for High Noon and was blacklisted in that. And he said I was fathered just when the name Gary Cooper was brought up, he just would go into rapture about how Cooper supported him, what he did for him. And in fact was instrumental when he was blacklisted. He got him to write the screenplay for a movie called A Hatful of Rain, directed by Fred Zinnemann, but under a pseudonym. But Cooper's the one that got him the job.
I heard and read that when Gary Cooper won the Oscar for High Noon, he wasn't available to accept, and John Wayne accepted the Oscar for him. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, John Wayne had actually criticized the movie High Noon as anti-American. Was there a little bit of levity in the fact that he asked John Wayne to accept the award for him?
You know, that's funny you bring that up, Sheldon. I had talked to Anthony Quinn before we started shooting, and he died before I could get him on camera. And it was clumsy because he had recently divorced. He was, and his wife got their huge apartment on York Avenue on the East River, and his huge art studio, which is a very successful painter. And he had moved up to Rhode Island, living on a farm with his new wife and son. So it was convenient for me. But he told me a story that I've never used because I don't have a backup for it to put it on camera. But it's they were shooting a movie together, he and Cooper and Barbara Stanwyck, in Mexico during when the Academy Awards were on. And Quinn had been nominated for his first time for Viva Zapata, Best Supporting Actor. And Quinn told me that Gary Cooper was his idol, that Cooper had saved him when he was in the movie The Plainsman when he was 19 years old. His first morning on the set, Quinn, he was supposed to be an Indian. And the minute he got there, he said, no Indian would say these lines. This is stupid. And Cecil B. DeMille, the director, just exploded and said, "You're fired. You're never going to work in this town again," et cetera, et cetera. And then he said, out of the blue, Cooper stepped up and said, "No, CB, the young man is right. Why would an Indian, after Cus's last stand, say this?" And he saved his thing. So he said, from then on, Coop and I were very good friends. And he said, whatever Coop did, I did from then on. So the director said, "You guys can fly back to L.A. And Quinn said, I wanted to. But he said, Coop said no, he didn't like that stuff. So if Coop wasn't going, I didn't go. So the night of the afternoon at Academy Awards, they set up a radio hookup. And Quinn said, I was right by that radio. I was so nervous. I had a corner of my eye. I saw Cooper and Barbara Sandwick each grab bottles of wine and go outdoors. And I thought, damn, he's not going to listen. But he said, if Coop's not listening, I'm not. So he said, I grabbed a bottle of wine and I joined them on a hilltop. And he said, we're there just chatting away in the back of my mind is saying, what's happening back there? Did I win? And he said, Coop didn't seem to care. And then he said, Coop sat up and started chuckling to himself. And Quinn said, I looked at Stanwyck and she shrugged. And we said, what's up? He said, well, I ran into John Wayne and Quinn Rock a couple of weeks ago. And Quinn said, did you pop him one? Because Wayne had tried to get Cooper blacklisted too during the Making a High Noon when he refused to walk off and threatened to walk off if Foreman's name was removed as screenwriter. And Cooper said, no. I asked him if he would pick up my Academy Award if he won. And Quinn said, Stanley. I said, what are you, that crazy son of a bitch? He said, no. What's the son of a bitch going to say if I win? And, of course, I don't know if you've ever seen the TV. It's the first one ever on TV. And Wayne gets up there. He's talking about chutzpah. And after congratulating Cooper and saying, what a great job, he said, and tomorrow morning, first thing, I'm getting a hold of my agent and find out why I wasn't offered High Noon. And the man was just filled with such hypocrisy. But Quinn said, Cooper's just great that way. He just said this sly. Well, that's funny that you asked that because it is bizarre when people see that and if they know anything about the history of High Noon. Wayne's role and that Wayne's role and his despicable role for my political prism of vision in the blacklist.
I thought it was a great story when I read it. It looks like it came from a good source. That's a great story.
Hang in there. We'll be right back with John Mulholland and another fascinating story about Gary Cooper and Ernest Hemingway.
When I looked, and Cooper died in 1961, and I think it was about 7 weeks after that, Hemingway died. Can you give some of your thoughts on the fact, I mean, I know they were close, but did Hemingway, after Cooper's death, go into kind of a state of depression?
Yeah, Hemingway was suffering tremendous. He had electroshock therapy, which destroys your short-term memory. And for a writer, as some of the people said on the documentary, for a writer to lose short-term memory, it's impossible to function. And he was having so much difficulty. He had tried to kill himself in March by walking into the propellers of a plane on a tarmac. He was in awful, awful shape. But as A.E. Hotchner told me, that Hemingway said that if he can get Coop, he can get anyone. What's the point of fighting him? Now, here's another thing where I couldn't put it on camera. I had talked to Jack Hemingway, Hemingway's oldest son, who was very good friends also with Cooper. And Jack told me that there's no doubt, again, I couldn't use this in the documentary because I didn't have a secondary source, but Jack told me that he is convinced that it was Cooper's death that finally put his father on the path to committing suicide. That, in many ways, Cooper had become, in real life, Hemingway's, the fantasy of his characters on the page, a Robert Jordan, Nick Adams and Frederick Henry. But again, I couldn't use them in the documentary because no secondary source.
Now, the True Gen is going to be released on Blu-ray in the near future, isn't it?
Trying to have it right around Hemingway's birthday, July 21st. Yeah.
I sure do want to thank you for taking the time to talk to me.
No, thank you, Sheldon. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
You're right here in the neighborhood at the Sheldon Eskin Show with me, Sheldon Eskin. And being one who enjoys telling the stories, doing interviews, I want to thank John Mulholland, one of the best storytellers and documentary writers. Go to his website at www.cooperhemingway.com. I think you'll really enjoy Cooper and Hemingway, The True Gen, narrated by Sam Watterson.
You know, I've been so fortunate because all of the people that I've been talking to are not only really talented in their own field, but they're nice people. And most of them are really charity-oriented as well.
So you got a lot of press junkets with the press card that we give you. Obviously, you're very active with all this stuff.
I have, in the 90s, I was using my press pass now you have to use it correctly. It's not something you can't abuse. But I wound up at the New Orleans Jazz and New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, where I wound up talking to and actually becoming pretty friendly with Alan Toussaint. And Alan gave me at the time his home phone. I said, I want to do an interview. He gives me his home phone number. He says, call me. And so when I start doing these things, and you have to be professional.
Right.
You're not there for a game. They're not there for a game. They're there for the true purpose. And I'm a big believer that I want to make people look as good as I can because the people I interview are good.
Right, right. And now you've been on other stations other than our FM station and now this AM one. You've been on other stations.
Yeah,
right?
I started off at a station called KPPC FM 106.7, which now, that frequency is still there, but it was the first FM underground station in all of Los Angeles. Now,
like I have a pirate station.
No, it was a real station, but it broadcast, and I say Los Angeles, but it broadcast from the basement of the Pasadena Presbyterian Church.
You have to start somewhere, right?
And, well, at that time, Tom Donahue and B. Mitch Reed started that station, and they were both at the top of their game. And I came along right about when they were moving on to KMET. You know, that was 94.7, a little bit of heaven.
Heavy metal, rock and roll, headbangers.
At that time it was all FM underground.
Yeah.
And God, did I learn? Because I started off selling spots. From sales, I had to produce the spots. Then producing the spots, I said someone has to voice the spots. So I became like, I think I did everything except sweep the floors because I would start and go through, and I loved being there, so it didn't matter. Same as here. I love what I do. So when I'm doing it, I do it.
Good. So give us a nice plug for your radio show.
Oh man, you gotta tune in 5 a.m. 5 to 5:30 on KPRO 1570 AM, or you can also go into SheldonEskinShow.com and you'll see me, and you'll also see the guests that I have. And there's a lot of artists that I've talked to, and their work is in museums. I mean, really, first cabin people, and you can't get any happier than I am.
How about an email? If somebody wants to contact you, how do they do that? You have a website too, I understand.
I have a website, that's SheldonEskinShow.com. You can contact me at Sheldon@SheldonEskinShow.com. And if you want to be confused, you can also get me at Sheldon@VoiceOfTheBlues.com.
Okay, all right. Well, anything else you want to add to this?
Just make sure to tune in, because we're going to do it. And if you have some songs you want to hear, it's the blues, hit Sheldon@VoiceOfTheBlues.com, and hey, let me know what you want, and I'll do it for you. Well, musically, that is. And and when you're listening to those interviews, just go to Sheldon@SheldonEskinShow.com. That's actually my email. Or go to SheldonEskinShow.com, and I'll be there.
All right, you heard it from him, Sheldon Eskin. Stay tuned, check him out, and thank you all for watching KNBS TV. Until next time, thank you for watching. Goodbye.
Thank you.